Every major death in Stranger Things explained, Eddie Munson. Loud, chaotic, and gloriously out of place, the Hellfire Club's ringleader was the kind of guy who made high school tolerable for the misfits who didn't fit anywhere else. Eddie Munson may have looked like trouble, but under the denim and sarcasm was a kid with more heart than half of Hawkins combined. When Chrissy Cunningham's horrific death in his trailer turned him into a wanted man, he didn't run from guilt. He ran because the truth was impossible to explain. Still, when it really mattered, he didn't run at all. Armed with a guitar, metal riffs, and a reckless sense of honor, he drew a storm of demobats away from his friends with a performance that doubled as a farewell. He could have escaped. He didn't. He fought until the end, bleeding out in Dustin's arms with a smile that said everything. For once, the town's favorite outcast finally got to be its hero. Connie Frazier. Behind the polite smile of a government agent hid a woman who made the word ruthless sound like a compliment. Connie Frazier's job wasn't to protect children, it was to protect the Hawkins Lab secrets, and if that meant killing witnesses, so be it. She worked directly under Dr. Brenner, tracking down 11 after her escape like a predator in a suit. Every knock on a door, every fake badge carried the same subtext: compliance or disappearance. Her final mistake was cornering a terrified girl who had finally decided she'd had enough of cages. When the agents closed in on 11 at the middle school, the air itself seemed to shift. One flick of 11's mind, and Frazier's skull and those of her entire team imploded in seconds. No slow-motion heroics, no last words. Just blood, shock, and silence. It was the first time the show reminded us that power without control doesn't make you safe. It makes you lethal. Jason Carver. For a guy who preached morality, the captain of Hawkins High's basketball team had a talent for missing the point. Jason Carver turned grief into a witch hunt, convinced that satanic cults, not supernatural monsters, were the real threat. While others fought to save their friends, he led a torch-wielding crusade against Eddie Munson, blind to the fact that his evil was playing Dungeons & Dragons, not summoning demons. His obsession made him dangerous, not because he was strong, but because he was sure he was right. When the final showdown began, Jason barged into the Creel house to stop Lucas and Max, still refusing to see the cracks forming beneath him. Literally. As Vecna opened his massive gate to merge the Upside Down with Hawkins, one rift split the room, cutting straight through Jason's body. One moment he was shouting about righteousness, the next he was gone, burned, crushed, erased by the apocalypse he never believed in. The town lost a hero. Irony won instead. Dr. Martin Brenner. Cold, meticulous, and always convinced he knew best, the so-called Papa of Hawkins Lab treated compassion like an experimental variable, useful only when it produced results. Dr. Martin Brenner built his empire on other people's trauma, prying open young minds to weaponize psychic power for the government. 11 wasn't his daughter. She was his project, his proof that control could masquerade as love. Years after his supposed death, he reappeared in the desert, helping Dr. Owens restore 11's abilities, not out of redemption, but obsession. Even as she grew stronger, he couldn't resist tightening the leash, convinced he alone understood her destiny. When the military attacked the facility, he tried to escape with her in tow, still calling it protection. A sniper's bullet finally ended his delusion. Bleeding out in the sand, he freed 11 from her shock collar and begged for forgiveness that never came. She just stared, silent, leaving him to die under the same sterile authority he once imposed on everyone else. Barbara Barb Holland. Being the sensible best friend in a teenage horror show is practically a death sentence, and Hawkins' most responsible girl learned that the hard way. Barbara Holland never wanted to go to Steve's party, she just didn't trust the crowd or the beer, and honestly, she was right on both counts. While Nancy disappeared upstairs chasing romance, Barb stayed by the pool, alone, bleeding from a minor cut that turned into a beacon for something monstrous. Moments later, she was dragged screaming into the Upside Down, her death unfolding off-screen but echoing across the entire series. The town forgot her, the government buried her, but fans never did. Justice for Barb became more than a meme. It became a protest for every character who gets sacrificed to move the plot forward. Ironically, the least reckless person in Hawkins became the show's first major casualty, proving that in Stranger Things, good behavior doesn't grant plot armor. It just makes your disappearance slightly more tragic. Billy Hargrove. Few characters managed to be both terrifying and heartbreaking, but this volatile stepbrother somehow pulled it off. Billy Hargrove strutted into Hawkins like a walking bad decision, shirt unbuttoned, ego inflated, and trauma buried under 10 layers of anger. Raised by an abusive father and consumed by resentment, he took every chance to lash out, especially at Max, the one person he could actually protect. In Season 3, his rage became someone else's weapon when the Mind Flayer possessed him, turning his cruelty into something monstrous. Under that control, he hunted his own friends and helped build the grotesque flesh creature that haunted Starcourt Mall. But at the final battle, a single memory, his mother's love, cracked the armor. For one fleeting moment, he was human again. He stepped between 11 and the creature, sacrificing himself in an act of redemption that hit harder than any punch he ever threw. Dying in Max's arms, he finally did something selfless, just too late for her to ever forget it. Heather Holloway. If there's one thing worse than lifeguard duty in Hawkins, it's lifeguard duty during an interdimensional invasion. Heather Holloway started out as the picture of summer normalcy, confident, friendly, and just trying to keep people from drowning at the pool. Unfortunately, she noticed Billy acting strangely, which in this town is practically volunteering for possession. Her well-meaning concern got her captured and infected by the Mind Flayer, transforming her into one of its eerily calm puppets. Soon after, she lured her own parents into the creature's control, serving dinner like everything was fine, right before they were dragged into the basement to be absorbed into a human soup of horror. When 11 later saw Heather's lifeless body in a psychic vision, the image was enough to make your stomach turn. Another innocent gone for doing the right thing. Her death reminded everyone that in Hawkins, curiosity isn't just dangerous, it's terminal. Sometimes minding your business really is the only way to survive. Chrissy Cunningham. Perfection was her prison, smiles, routines, and the unbearable weight of being the girl everyone envied, but no one actually knew. Chrissy Cunningham seemed like your classic cheerleader cliché until Vecna exposed the cracks beneath the gloss. Haunted by visions of her abusive mother and tormented by sounds only she could hear, she turned to Eddie Munson not for drugs, but for comfort. In his cluttered trailer, two broken people shared a rare moment of peace. Then the lights flickered and the nightmare began. Trapped in Vecna's illusion, Chrissy levitated midair as her body contorted in impossible ways, bones snapping like twigs while Eddie watched helplessly. It was the first death of Season 4 and one of the most disturbing sequences in the entire series. Her brutal end set off a chain reaction. Eddie's manhunt, the town's hysteria, and the realization that Hawkins wasn't dealing with demons anymore, but something far worse. Vecna didn't just kill Chrissy, he shattered the illusion that anyone in this town was safe. Bob Newby. Being the nicest guy in Hawkins is basically an early death sentence, and Joyce Byers' sweet, tech-loving boyfriend never stood a chance. Bob Newby was the human embodiment of a cozy sweater, earnest, patient, and completely out of his depth in a town where monsters crawl out of walls. He wasn't brave by nature, just practical enough to know someone had to do the hard thing. When the power went out at Hawkins Lab and demo dogs started turning hallways into blood-soaked mazes, Bob volunteered to restore the system. He navigated the dark alone, clutching a walkie-talkie and a Radio Shack education like they were divine protection. Against all odds, he succeeded, unlocked the doors, saved the others, and then made the fatal mistake of smiling too soon. Seconds from safety, a demo dog lunged, dragging him down as Joyce watched in horror. It was a death so unfair it almost felt personal. In a show full of soldiers and psychics, it took a regular guy to prove heroism doesn't need superpowers. Just bad luck. Benny Hammond. Kindness might be a virtue, but in Hawkins, it's also a liability. Benny Hammond was just a small-town diner owner who thought he was helping a lost kid. He offered 11 food, shelter, and a quiet place to rest after she escaped from Hawkins Lab, something no one else had ever done for her. For a brief moment, he was the first adult in her life who wasn't trying to exploit or cage her. But decency doesn't go unpunished in this show. When Benny called social services to do the responsible thing, the agent who arrived wasn't there to help. Connie Frazier put a bullet in his head before he could even realize what was happening. His death was quick, shocking, and brutally matter-of-fact. The kind of moment that told audiences, this isn't that kind of show. Benny's diner went quiet, the burgers still on the grill, and the tone for Stranger Things was set. Good people die early, and innocence doesn't last long in Hawkins. Alexei. Few deaths in Stranger Things managed to hurt and amuse fans at the same time, but this cherry slurpee-loving scientist pulled it off effortlessly. Alexei wasn't a villain, just a Soviet engineer doing his job until he realized what his work was actually unleashing. Once captured by Hopper and Joyce, he adapted to American life like a kid in a candy store, literally. His love for corn dogs, cartoons, and fairground prizes made him oddly endearing, a childlike soul trapped in Cold War chaos. For a brief moment, it looked like he might make it out alive. finally laughing freely at the town fair with Murray by his side. Then reality, in the form of the assassin Grigori, showed up with a gun and zero sentiment. One clean shot, and the laughter stopped. His death was abrupt, almost cruel in its timing, right when he'd learned what joy actually felt like. In a show obsessed with nostalgia, Alexei's story was a painful reminder. Not every 80s memory ends with fireworks and happy music. Max Mayfield. Defiance has always been her trademark. Sarcastic quips, Walkman blasting, and an unshakable will to face whatever nightmare Hawkins threw at her. Max Mayfield knew fear better than most, but she refused to let it own her. After narrowly escaping Vecna's grasp once with the power of Kate Bush and friendship, she understood exactly what awaited her the second time around. Instead of hiding, she volunteered as bait, determined to end it all for good. In the Creel house attic, surrounded by echoes of her trauma, she faced Vecna's illusions alone, while her friends fought for their lives in the Upside Down. This time, music wasn't enough. Her body broke midair, bones snapping, eyes bleeding, as Eleven watched helplessly through a psychic link. And yet, somehow, Eleven pulled her back, restarting her heart but not her mind. Now Max lies in a hospital bed, trapped between worlds, technically alive, spiritually gone. In a series filled with miracles, hers feels like the cruelest one yet. Survival that doesn't feel like living. Fred Benson. Nancy's inquisitive newspaper partner carried guilt over a childhood car accident that killed a friend. Investigating Vecna's pattern, he joined her on a lonely country road at dusk. As they approached a guardrail, Fred's flashlight cut through the mist. Vecna manipulated his worst memory, a flaming wreckage and pleas for help, then his bones shattered in an unseen grip. His body slumped against the guardrail, blood pooling beneath him as Nancy's scream pierced the night. Fred Benson's death revealed how Vecna weaponized guilt, turning inner torment into a deadly trap. Patrick McKini. Lucas's eager basketball teammate joined a late-night stakeout at the quarry. Wading into the water, he scanned for signs of Vecna's gate as Jason's mocking texts buzzed in his pocket. Suddenly, the water erupted in a sickly green flash and invisible tendrils crushed his limbs. He was pulled under by forces beyond comprehension, his scream echoing across the lake before silence swallowed it. Patrick's death pushed Jason into terror and proved Vecna exploited hidden trauma to ensnare his victims. Virginia and Alice Creel. In 1959, Henry Creel's mother and sister sought refuge in Hawkins after his emerging powers terrified their home. Late one night, young Henry's telepathy spiraled out of control, walls bleeding with psychic energy. Their bodies lay mutilated in the living room, bones shattered, faces frozen in terror. Their screams never reached the town. Victor Creel was blamed and imprisoned for murders he didn't commit. Those killings unveiled the primal brutality of one, later Vecna, and marked the genesis of Hawkins's nightmares. Agent Harmon. Assigned to protect Will, Mike, and Jonathan, he provided cover fire as Vecna's assault intensified. His bullets drew the creature's attention, giving the boys time to escape in Argyle's pizza van. He bled out on the van's floor, slumped beside terrified teens, his last act ensuring their survival. Before dying, he handed them a crucial phone number, a reminder that even amid supernatural terror, human duty and sacrifice remain indispensable. Grigori. A silent Kremlin enforcer, he moved like a shadow through Hawkins' secret operations. Grigori executed Alexei at the fair with a single, unflinching shot, then tracked Hopper and Joyce beneath Starcourt. A brutal hand-to-hand fight erupted in a dim maintenance bay, each blow echoing off concrete. Despite his skill, Grigori underestimated Hopper's desperation and resourcefulness. A final savage punch sent him sprawling against a railcar wall, ending the assassin's reign of terror. The Hawkins Lab massacre victims. Facility corridors should have been safe. Instead, a surge of psychic energy disabled alarms in an instant. After 11 deactivated the failsafe on Henry Creel's power limiter chip, he unleashed telekinetic fury. Over a dozen child subjects, orderlies, and guards were flung into walls, their bodies contorted and lifeless on blood-stained floors. Scientists found limbs twisted like broken branches and ceilings splattered with gore. 11 banished one into the Upside Down, unwittingly birthing Vecna and opening the first gateway beneath Hawkins. That's every unforgettable death that's scarred Hawkins and us so far. From heroes to villains, no one escapes the Upside Down forever. If you think that's the end, think again, because Stranger Things has a nasty habit of reviving nightmares. Subscribe before the next season claims its next victim.